Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have my friend of very many years, Daniela Butta, on the line today. Daniela, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm doing pretty well, thanks. I think it's really funny. We were just discussing off air how long we've known each other, but why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll kind of dive into the backstory.
Oh, I'd love to. Okay, so I'm Daniela. I am the host of In Short Supply, which is a podcast. I like to affectionately call it a dumpster fire, but most people don't appreciate that. But I mean, I'm kind of saying in an endearing way. I'm a little bit. I mean, I'm very self-deprecating, like in my humor,
Ditto.
Which is not popular among my friends, but. Really, In Short Supply is kind of like that conversation with your friend that is almost like yours, where like you have that wrong advice that which is kind of a pun, but like you know, people come to you, they want to talk to you about things. And it's the same for me. I kind of use the podcast as like this like stream of consciousness. Let's just talk about what's going on. I really like to talk about the things that people don't like to talk about. So like
Ditto.
Body image issues, anxiety, feeling depressed, having bad days. Like nobody talks about that.
For sure.
So, right. And I think that like social media is very much a highlight reel of like, I'm only going to show you what I want you to see. Whereas I'm like, oh, I'm going to show you everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. So I started that podcast about 1.5 years ago, which is super fun. So, and I really started it as a way for me to listen to people better. I think we all kind of like talk to each other and we don't listen, and we're just like waiting for our turn to talk when someone's talking. So like you latch on to something they said and you're like, I have a story that goes along with that, or I can relate to it. And I don't think it's malicious. But I started the podcast to learn how to listen better. Very much still a work in progress, but yeah, I did that. And then in my real life, I'm a teacher of 8th grade English, which is just as fun as you can imagine it to be.
I mean, I not to interrupt you, but I absolutely love my 8th grade English teacher. Her name is Miss Giordano, and we are Facebook friends, and she hypes me up online all the time. I love her. She's the best.
Is she still a teacher?
Don't know. Not sure.
Okay, because I had a supervisor when I was in college, and her name was Giordano.
From
What's
West
her
Essex?
first name?
Ooh.
Is it Susan?
I don't know. Yeah, Sue. Yeah.
Wait, that was my supervisor
Oh my
when
God,
I was in
short
college.
little Italian brunette.
Yeah.
Wow,
Oh my
such a
God, this
small world.
is so weird. Okay, so this is actually perfect because that's like blowing my mind right now. She was the nicest person on
The
earth.
best, yeah.
When I was in college, she, I guess, was like an adjunct for like supervising education students. So she would come into. I did my field work at James Caldwell High School. So she would come into the high school and like observe me and like, grade me. And then she was really nice to me, but
she was amazing.
That's how I became a teacher. That's so crazy.
That leads very well into how we know each other for, geez, I've.
It has to be like 10 years.
It's close. It's like 7-8 years. As I've discussed an unfortunate amount of times on the podcast, I used to write for websites like Elite Daily and Thought Catalog.
That's unfortunate.
Reading back the work is unfortunate. Maybe not the experience. The experience was great.
Growth.
Sure. Yeah, we'll use that word. So I wrote an article, went kind of viral, and you DM'd me. We became friends. It was super random because we're both from New Jersey. And tell me it from your perspective, how the whole thing kind of came to be, and like how we've now been friends for like 7 years or 8, whatever.
Okay, so first I'm gonna just like do a little bit of a clarification. I DM'd you not in a gross way.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, yeah. It wasn't
kidding.
like... No.
It wasn't like, hey.
Yeah. Be like, oh my God, you're so hot from your non-existent bio picture. No, it was like, I read your article. It was so good. And you said such nice things. I was like, this is a very nice person.
Oh, thanks. Well, okay. So let's rewind 8 years. It had to be about 8 years ago because it was like 2013, I think, or 2012 around
Gross.
then.
So long ago.
I can't even think about that time in my life, which is so funny because, I mean, personally at that time, which I don't even know, I could probably find the message that I sent you, but again, I'm not gonna open up wounds.
Yeah, no wounds. It was all positive.
Yeah. Well, okay. So around the time that article came out, it was Why Chivalry is Dead from a Man's Perspective. Was that the title of it?
Yep.
Something like that.
I didn't come up with the title.
What'd you say?
I did not come up with the title.
You didn't?
No. So the Elite Daily process was pretty, you write the article, you come up with like what you want the title to be, and then they make it as clickbaity as possible so that people would read it.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, I would never have written something from a man's perspective, and I am using air quotes because it's so douchey. The article's right, douchey like reading it back now. Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I'll just go fuck myself, please. But yeah, sorry to go ahead.
Like, here's why I'm an expert. Right. Okay, so I read the article, and I think at the time it like really resonated and like not triggered me because that wasn't like the buzzword then, but like it really got me because right around that time, I went through the hardest breakup I had ever gone through.
Yep.
It was so almost like demoralizing in a way. And it was like that first love bullshit and how you really like make somebody your whole self and identity. I was also 19 or 20 at the time. So, very much not secure in myself, very much wanting like that outside like gratification from other people. But I think the article itself was kind of almost like a security blanket, if that makes sense. Like you read it and you're like, wow, maybe it's not me that, is asking for too much. Or maybe I think you said really well in the article that like women needed to be better about like having higher standards and not accepting a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And I, at the time I was accepting a bare minimum from the previous boyfriend who,
as most of us do when we're young, right?
Right. Like, you don't know. You're like, oh, you're giving me the slightest bit of attention and it's when it's convenient for you. And, right. So like, I mean, this could be a whole other episode of just like
sold
dating someone who like you're trying to like save this person into like liking you, and it doesn't work. Nope. Spoiler alert, it never works out.
It does in the end with someone else.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, yeah, now I'm married and that's a whole other crazy story. But I read the article and I had reached out to you because I was in such a bad place, and it was kind of just like, hey, keep writing, and that's exactly what I needed to read and to kind of like think about within myself of like, I'm not asking for too much, but I am kind of like accepting the love that I think I deserve.
Yeah.
So yeah, I reached out to you. We had a really good conversation. We started following each other on, social media and things like that. And we've kind of just been like chugging along and continuously like talking to each other for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
And we've actually never met each other in person. Isn't that the craziest thing?
I think it's funny because that is the reoccurring theme of my podcast. Although like now, since like I'm trying to make a more conscious effort of like these people who like play a quote unquote digital like role in my life, like trying to like incorporate them into my actual physical life, which in the last year hasn't exactly been the easiest. But like I did a podcast episode a few months ago with a friend of mine, Freya, who similarly we became friends via my article and blah blah blah. And she's an Irish girl living in New York, and then we met for the first time to record the podcast. So I know we're doing this digitally, but like that next step is beers at a bar somewhere, and
100%.
Yeah. We'll do a live recording in like real life, but it is funny.
I think that's a great idea.
It is funny because we have known each other for a long time. We've like been, I feel like we've had like one of those relationships where like I've always asked you like opinions on things, like from a relationship perspective, because that's kind of like how our friendship started. You were kind of telling me like what you were going through, and then I was like relating and blah blah blah. And you've always been someone who like, even though we've never met, like we've always been able to have like a pretty decent like conversation about, you know, what we're going through, and it's been nice. You know, I've appreciated it for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. And likewise, I mean, it's funny because, you know, you don't realize, like, you know, when you're kind of just like going through the motions of your life, you don't realize the effect that people have on you or that you have on other people. And I think when you actually sit down and discuss, like, hey, 8 years ago, that was really important what you said, or that stuck with me and I remembered it, or even now, 8 years later, like, look how far we've come, and like you've still been this constant. I just feel like we don't give people their flowers while they're still here. And that's like something that I've learned through so many hard times, where it's like, I mean, not to like get on my soapbox or anything, but like I grew up with my dad, who has been sick my entire life. And like that actually really made me think about all the time, like, don't be an asshole. Like, you don't know what you have. And when I was 15, my best friend was killed by a drunk driver. And it's like, you know, all of these, like, these things that during your formative years, you don't realize are like the stepping stones to like being present now. And like, listen, I mean, there's many days where I spend 4 hours scrolling through, you know, social media, and I'm not like this,
that's
like
okay,
holier than thou, like, you know, oh, you always have to be present, because I'm not. But
no, I appreciate that. I mean, it's the recognition of it.
Yeah, I'm a true believer in giving people their flowers while they are here.
I love that. I'm stealing that. That's so good.
Yeah, well, you can. I mean, I don't think I'm the first person to ever say that.
No, I know. I will credit you though.
Okay, I mean, listen, the sponsorships will just roll in. No, but I think that it's so big because it's, you know what, it's actually become so second nature to me that people are like surprised by it. Like if I'm hanging out with a friend and we're, you know, having drinks or having lunch or whatever, and I'm like, I'm so happy that we're here together today, or like, you know, thanks for meeting up with me. Or the other day I said to my good friend, I was like, you're one of my best friends. Like I said it to their face. We never do that. And it can be off-putting to people. They're like, okay, like, do you have something you need to tell me?
Right.
Is there like this?
Something has to be wrong for you to be
and I'm like,
overtly.
no, I just think that, I mean, I will be the first to say that I need to be better at doing it with like family. I think that's one thing that we all kind of like, they're this constant in our life, and we don't really necessarily remember a time without them. So it's like, you know, you should maybe tell your parents something, or your brother, or your, you know, for me, even my husband, I'm just like, you know, you're this constant that's been in my life for almost 8 years, where it's like, you know.
Oh, I think I should take credit then.
100%.
I think I should. Yeah, I introduced you guys.
Reconnected.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it was you. I connected with my husband right after, I think, your article. So in the very beginning of 2014.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Maybe I realized my worth, or maybe it was just
I love
really
that. I mean, it's 99.9% timing. I will take 0.01%.
Fine.
Yeah.
Those are fair odds. I'm into that. We you know, it's funny, we had our first date at the Cloverleaf Tavern.
Oh, nice. That's my spot. I'm there. I mean, like,
is it? Oh my God, that's so funny.
Not in like the
last
year.
I haven't been back since.
Yeah, it's been. Oh, really? Oh my God. Yeah.
That was almost 8 years ago.
Jeez, well, you're missing out. The buddies of mine who do the Beer You Are podcast, they just did a live recording with I think America the Brewtiful podcast, and they were at Cloverleaf. They interviewed the owner. It was pretty cool. But we've been going there since like right after college, doing the MBAs and the PhDs, and just drinking so many different kinds of beers. But that's funny. That's like such a. You guys got to go back. It's the best place.
I know. We don't go because, you know what? I don't go up there anymore because there's really no reason to. But yeah, I mean, I went to college up there, so it was like Cloverleaf. I'm gonna like really say some suspicious places, but like
Cleveland's.
Ringside.
Yeah. Nice.
Cleveland's. Is that it? Are they even still there?
Ringside is Cleveland's RIP. Passed away many years ago. Yeah.
Probably because I was going there when I was 18.
Probably.
And not 21. Oh my gosh, you know how many times I went there that like the police like raided the place? Like more times, I think I went there more times where it was raided than when it wasn't. And we would all just be like, Well,
it's funny.
Sorry.
I'll tell you a funny Cleveland story. So it was called Suburban Tavern in like 2014 or so. So I do this thing every year where for Lent, in addition to giving something up, I take something on. So like I've learned the guitar, I started photography, and for this one Lent year, I gave up drinking and became a bartender for 40 days. It was miserable, but I happened to do it at the old Cleveland's, and it was pretty funny. Yeah, good times.
I love that.
I
just had a thought.
Go ahead.
There's a very likely possibility that we were probably at Cleveland's at the same time, and we probably didn't even know.
1,000%, yeah. But you're like you're incredibly short, so I probably just accidentally looked right above you.
You can't find me. You cannot find me.
Yeah.
That's actually like a plus in my life where I can very literally fly under the radar and people don't know, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna
blend
go
in
to the front here. My favorite thing.
You brought something up that I think is kind of important to relapse and
sure.
retouch on, about how like we've got these platforms and whatever you want to call it, podcasts, where I'm guilty of this, where like I say a lot of things, a lot of feelings that I have about like what I want out of my life and where I've come. And like, you mentioned how, I don't want to be on a soapbox and whatnot, but like, I think it's nice that and in my case, I've been able to be more cognizant of the things that I've like done good and bad in my life. And like you mentioned, spending 4 hours scrolling mindlessly on Instagram or TikTok, whatever. Yeah, I'm guilty of that as well. But I also try to do a lot more. And I think that it is relatable for people to get caught in those loops, and not so relatable for people who want to kind of do more. Like the 9 to 5, go to work, come home. It's just not really like that fulfilling. And I've grown so much in just the last few years that I appreciate that you kind of like relate in the same manner, and that's like just another reason why I think our friendship works, because we are similar in that like we want more, even though like I can give you opinions on your relationship and I'm not in one, and I can give you opinions on your marriage and I'm not married, and I can give you opinions on things and they could be my thoughts and my feelings, and I don't need to be an expert on them. And I think similarly you're the same way.
Well, yeah, and I think you said it perfectly. Like, you're not an expert, but who is? Like I think that's so big that everyone kind of has this disclaimer of like, I'll give you this advice or I'll talk to you about this thing, but I'm no expert. If I wanted expert advice, I would become the expert. Like, I think that I think there's such things, magic in like, I'm in the trenches with you. And I think that's super important, because having a platform, like, I never want to get to the point where I'm like, I know everything and here's how I'm going to now tell you how to live your life. Like, I would 100% agree with you that we both are pretty unapologetic in the fact that we do want more. And I think I say unapologetic because so many people very guiltily will be like, yeah, this is my, job, or this is my whatever. But on my own, and it's this like, shameful thing.
Yeah.
Right. Where I like shout from the rooftops many things about myself. Like, I have a podcast that I love and I'm so proud of, but it also is, like, I'm sure you can agree, very vulnerable. Like, you have to really put yourself out there, and that, that comes with its own struggle. I will literally scream from the rooftops that I go to therapy. Like, this is something that I don't think people want to talk about. And it actually like kind of pisses me off, because I'm like, who do you think you're fooling, in the sense of like, you have it all together? Like, yeah, well, come on, we're all faking it.
No, yeah, it's like the job thing, like everyone fakes it till they makes it, and then like the life thing, like you mentioned off air, like Instagram is a highlight reel. It's not like real, 100%. Right? I don't post like the sad shit, the days that I'm depressed, the days that I'm like not feeling myself. Like, I struggle with imposter syndrome when it comes to my photography, and I second guess myself like on an hourly, minute by minute basis, but that's completely normal. And like anyone who, it is normal. Yeah, anyone who could pretend otherwise is not, they're just kidding themselves.
Agreed.
For sure.
Agreed. I think imposter syndrome, and I talked about this on one of my episodes on my podcast, it's such a real thing. And I do think that imposter syndrome is like like hatched from social media, because you're like, okay, I'm doing this thing, but look at this person who's doing it better than me.
Oh, yeah.
Or hey, you know, I'm a teacher, and that itself in and of itself comes with a lot of imposter syndrome, because you're surrounded by people who are doing the exact same thing as you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I really, you know, I've been teaching for 6 or 7 years, but it's like, you know, even every day it's like, you know, but what about that teacher? Or with the podcast, you know, I really try not to look at, you know, the analytics. I really try not to look at the followers, because, you know, that's not the reason that I started it. It wasn't to become, you know, a professional podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's so much in imposter syndrome because of other people. It's not because of us. It's because of people who, you know, and I really just try to like push through that feeling, because then you will never do anything. And I think that 9 to 5, well, for me, it's a little bit different. If I taught till 5 o'clock, I would die. Not trying to be dramatic, but I would die. But I think that, I do love my job on most days, but I would be lying to you if I said that that's originally what I wanted to do with my life.
Sure.
And I think that's a really hard feeling to reconcile, because I think that, excuse me, when it comes to your dreams, like, you know, one of my first or second episodes that I did on my podcast going back was like, we stopped believing in ourselves a really long time ago, because if we all were, you know, true to our inner child or whatever, and said, hey, I'm actually going to pursue the thing that I wanted to do when I was a kid, like, I think the majority of us, generally speaking, would have very different careers.
Oh, for sure.
And we all got like snuffed out at a certain age. Like you know, it's not that it's funny, but it is kind of funny that if you would have asked me, I don't know, maybe even like 15 years ago, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? The answer wasn't a teacher.
Sure.
So it's, you know, and then, you know, I think right when I started going to college, or, you know, deciding to go to college, it was like, well, I better figure it out, because it's, you know, you can't actually follow your dreams.
I talk about this a lot. Yeah, I talk about this a lot on my podcast, because it's only till, you know, super later in life, in the last, you know, let's call it 5 years, that I've found the things that like legitimately make me happy. And that's photography, and that's this podcast. Yeah. And neither one of them are monetarily fulfilling. And I don't give a shit. I will spend more time taking pictures and interviewing people and having these conversations for $0 than anything else. Because, like, on the flip side, last year was the most monetarily successful year of my life. I had a job for 6 months. I got laid off in COVID. I started my own company. I crushed it. I did great. I am no happier than I was unemployed 7 years ago when I got laid off on another job. Like, you know, I've learned in the last 12 months that I can make myself happier doing things that don't necessarily have to pay my bills. You can find the thing that makes you the money that you need to survive, and then still be able to fill your time up with doing a million other things. And you don't learn that in college, and you don't get taught that in high school. They don't prepare you for a life outside of get your degree and make your money, and then what else you do is totally up to you. But no. I got caught in a trap in my 20s where I was making a lot of money, and I was just buying more shit, and I was, you know, going to clubs and getting bottle service and like doing all these things that I thought were like, oh, this is like what you do when you're in your 20s. And like, I look back now and I'm like, it's so fucking stupid. Like, who was I trying to pretend to be? Yeah. It's like,
I'm listening to you, and I'm like, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because if you really sit there, you're like, did I even want to do that?
I mean, like partly, yes. You know, it's not like it was all sad. Like, I mean, getting drunk in a club with your friends is fun. But like,
when you're 21, you're like, this is the life. Now I'm like, not one part of me wants to do that. But I think you're 100% right when you're saying that, like, we're never taught to, or even like, it's never even a conversation of like, do what actually makes you happy. Because I think when you're 18, happiness and like sustainability are not the same thing.
Sure.
And I think that when you're 18, your happiness doesn't come from the things that now make you happy when you're in your 30s. I
For
think,
sure.
it's
not even, I was sorry to interrupt you. It's not even that it's not encouragement. It's that we're not given the opportunity to explore ourselves. It is, you need to get these grades so that you can get into this university so that you can get this job. But you're never,
and it's just this ladder.
Yeah. And then you end up, you end up 28, 30, like, cool, I've got all this shit. What else is there? Like, I've got a lot of stuff. It's cool stuff, but like, if my house burns down, I have nothing.
Right. I think that these these things, I want to come up with a better word, but yeah, like when you buy something and you're like, ooh, I have this thing now, whether it's, for me, I remember my first job, I was making, good money in the sense that I was 16, living at home and had no expense. Like I had nothing. I didn't have to pay for anything besides my car and the clothes that, I wanted to wear, which brings me to my point. I would go to the mall and I would go to Express and I would spend $60 on a shirt.
Yeah.
And thinking about, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm so great. Like I look at me, like money is not an object. Whereas now I'm like, first of all, that shirt was probably hideous.
Yeah,
second of all,
like from Express. So yeah.
Right. Like, can we not? And I just remember thinking like, this is what you do. Like you now have a job and you buy the things that are going to make you feel better. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know, but it's very much like I also grew up with immigrant parents. So my parents were born in Italy, came to this country when they were teenagers. Yeah. Oh, are you a child of immigrants as well?
No, I'm not. But my grandmother was born in Italy, and my all my great grandparents were.
Yeah.
But I do remember that. Yeah. No, I know it counts.
Yeah. So I'm like, I give you permission that counts. But yeah, you grow up with these values, and it's very much a work ethic value. Like you work hard, and then you can reap the benefits of working hard. And it's never work hard, but also enjoy your life.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very hardworking dad, and he now enjoys his life, but that's after 45 years of just like grinding. And when he was 45, he got extremely sick and he needed a kidney transplant. And it was only after that I feel like his perspective like totally changed. And he still works and he's still very successful, and he's able to do the things and live in abundance and enjoy his life. But I think his philosophy of like live first really changed after he got sick. And it's a shame that it took that to like,
well, it's a shame that's
make a shift for our family.
Yeah, it's a shame that's what it always takes. It's never like a great thing that, is a catalyst for people to make a, dramatic change in their life. It's never like,
when something bad happens.
Yeah, it's like when there's a pandemic and you're like, wow, I really wish I had spent more time with my family. Wow, I wish I had spent more time with my friends. Wow, I wish I spent more time telling people I love them, because there's no guarantees. And like, that's what you learn with age, because when you get older, things just get taken from you, people, places, things, etc. Mm-hmm. And no one prepares you for that. No one teaches you that. You learn that with time. But it is unfortunate, and I've said it a million times on this podcast, that it is later in life that I've found my passions and my loves. And like, whatever, if I was doing it 15 years earlier, I might have quit at some point. Maybe you find the things at the point in your life when you're supposed to. Which brings me to my first question for you is, what made you a year and a half ago start your podcast?
Good question. So again, I'm going to bring up my dad. My dad, a couple years ago, bought a studio microphone, right? Not this one that I'm using today, but like he bought one for the sole purpose of singing karaoke, recording himself, and then like listening to it back.
Oh my God. I love that.
He's a great time. My dad is a great time. He doesn't take himself too seriously. Now, I don't think that I was like formally introduced to my dad until I was like 18, because he was so serious. Where now he's totally not. But he bought this microphone. he's like a little kid, you know, he used it for like a week and then it was like collecting dust in the corner of his office. And I had gotten married in August of 2019. And while I was, of course, extremely happy to be marrying my husband and having all of these good things happening, personally, I was really, really struggling with anxiety, bouts of depression. And it was really because I was feeling like I wasn't like living up to my potential. And I didn't want to start this next chapter of my life in this like slump, so to speak. And I was really surrounding myself with the constant people in my life who are amazing and I'm so grateful for, but there were also a lot of toxic people in my life. And I was very much allowing them to kind of call the shots. And I knew that I had to make a change. And I was like, okay, what is something that you've always wanted to do, but, never actually thought you were like good enough? And one thing, which is probably extremely obvious at this point, one thing that I love to do is talk. And it's always been this like sore point in my life where I've always heard like, oh, she talks so much. She's too much. She talks a lot. You can't get a word in. Like, and it's always been this really, really negative connotation. And I was like, okay, I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to make this into a positive thing for me, because it was almost like an insecurity where I constantly felt like I had to like become smaller and diminish and not, I would go to events or social, gatherings or whatever. And on the way there, be telling myself in my head, like, don't talk so much.
Wow.
And make sure other people talk and only speak when you're spoken to and don't. And it was really, really like bad to tell yourself not to be you.
Yeah. It's minimizing yourself.
So yeah, I was very, very much like just really trying to like shrink myself into like the smallest room possible and not like fit the room that I was in. So I was like, okay, how do I change this and actually like start to like myself a little bit and not be afraid to be myself? And I said, okay, well, what do people who love to talk do for a living? They are radio hosts or they're talk show hosts or whatever. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to do that, but I could do this on my own. And so I originally had started with that idea of, accepting myself for being the talker that I am. Like, I will talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. If I'm in the grocery store, like waiting in line, like we're about to have a connection. Like, you don't know it yet, but, I think it's like this, I'm very, very empathetic, and I always think of it as a good thing. My husband is very much like,
too much.
He loves it, but he's like, you need to let people, like, that person's fine over there. You don't need to cry about them because they're eating alone. I'm like, do you think I should go sit with them? I would be lying to you if I said that I haven't done that before. But
that's sweet though.
Oh, yeah, isn't it? But I started with that idea, and then, like I had mentioned, I was really struggling with truly listening to people. I think, and I don't remember if this was on air or off air, but I had said to you, we spend a lot of our times in conversation, not actually listening to the person who's talking to us, but just waiting for our turn to talk. Like, there's going to be this like little, lull, and then you can kind of pounce and give that person the bullet points of what you wanted to say, because they said, oh, I went to, the Taylor Swift concert, 2 years ago, and it was awesome. And you could be like, I was there too, and here's my experience, and here's why I love her more than you love her, and like really make it about you and not actually about the person that you're talking to. And I found myself doing it all the time. And I do think it's because I am an empathetic person, that I want the person I'm speaking to know that I relate to you too, and here's where I'm coming from. But it can come off as like
douchey.
Really douchey. And I never want to be like that. And it's a work in progress, but originally the plan was to be unapologetic about my love of talking, and also learn how to listen to people. And then it very quickly changed when COVID hit, because, well, I wasn't going to be interviewing a lot of people and, you know, having these conversations, because at the time, what was there to talk about besides the fact that we were all at home, we were all struggling with being at home, and we didn't know, there was no end date. There was no like, okay, at this point in time, this is when life is going to go back to normal. So the podcast changed because I had to change. So it was, you know, it still had those like foundational things, but it really was like, hey, let's talk about the struggle. Let's talk about being in the trenches right now. And I think the cherry on top is, I always like to ask people, like, what do you think we in society are like in short supply of in this moment? But then also, what are you in short supply of? Because I don't think we take the time to talk about real things. I think we love to talk about
Scratch
the things that we're really good at being like, this is what I'm, you know, killing right now. I'm awesome at doing these things, and I'm, you know, look at how amazing I am. But if I were to ask you, like, what are you in short supply of right now? You would have to really dig deep and be like, oh, I don't like that question.
Yeah.
So I really am mindful about my podcast or my social media with in short supply of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, I think highlight reels about your life are good, you know, when they need to be, but I think that people have way more of a respect for you when you can say, like, hey, I couldn't get out of bed today.
Mm-hmm.
Or I spent 20 minutes scrolling Instagram and now I feel like garbage because of it. And as a woman, and I don't want to be insensitive because I know men deal with insecurities and things of that nature, and they are not allowed to talk about it because it's not, you know, appropriate in society to talk about your feelings as a guy.
Yep.
You know, I think with women, we compare ourselves to others minute by minute. It's so, oh my God, it's so hard. But
exhausting, I imagine.
Oh my God, it's so exhausting. But I'm the first person to be like, hey, I'm having a hard time looking in the mirror today. Like, you know, you have to be able to do that, because who am I kidding? If you know, I'm like, me? Oh, perfect, amazing. You know, I don't think that people respect that as much as we used to. I think maybe 15 years ago, I would be like, oh, I aspire to be, you know, just like a Victoria's Secret model and perfect, and that's who I value. And now I'm like,
yeah,
if I ever say that, it's because I'm being held hostage and someone's telling me to say that, and that's a cry for help. Like, right, you know, to come get me.
Put that in the show notes to remember for next time. I think you obviously said a ton of things that are super important, and one of the reasons why I like having these conversations on my podcast is I like to know where people are at in their life and how they got there, whether it's a photographer who's shooting with major brands, whether it's an actress who's working on TV shows and stuff, because I think you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been, and you learn so much about yourself over time. And you know, you mentioned the thing where when you're having conversation with someone, you don't do a good enough job listening. It's because you're always ready for the thing that you want to say, and I'm guilty of that as well. And part of that probably is social media, because you know, we are all the stars of our own show, even though you know, not a whole lot of people watch it, but we are all the stars of our own show. And well, the thing I have to say is more important than the thing you have to say. So you need to get through what the hell you're trying to get out, so I can tell you about the thing that I'm trying to relate to you about. And it's like probably 50% empathy and 50% like conceit. And I've started doing a much better job of trying not to do that. And really, it happens more when I'm drunk, because I'm just like excited about having these conversations with people. But I'm so guilty of it. I was doing it while you were talking. I was like, oh, okay, I could jump about that. I could do about that. And then it's like, no, just like listen, like let the conversation end, and then allow myself to interject with the summarity or whatever of of what my feelings are. But yeah, I mean, you starting your podcast was one of the first inspirations I had for the ill-fated Daily Ramble podcast that I was doing with my brother, because I've always consumed a ton of podcasts, and I love the medium. I think it's just, I listened to radio growing up, going to and from school and at the gym and stuff, and I've found podcasts to be just the most the most consumed media that I have on my phone on like a daily basis usually. And then I saw you start a podcast, and I remember we were talking about it, probably close to 2 years ago. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I definitely want to do that. And then my buddies started their beer podcast. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to do it. And I'm here. And these have been some of the most rewarding conversations that I've had with, people who I consider friends for 8 years that have never met. And like but it's funny, but it's also true, because you also like, I tell everyone after I hang up with the conversations that like, oh, you're on my podcast, we're family now. It's like you're able to have these kind of open and uninterrupted conversations with people that you don't ordinarily have a chance to. And like you said, we have such a really unfortunate process of scratching the surface of conversations with our friends and family, and you don't get an opportunity to say like, hey, like, yeah, I was depressed yesterday, I couldn't get out of bed, or I woke up this morning and I just was a mess. Like, nobody says these things to their friends, and like, it's unfortunate. And like, I've only now reached the place where I can have these conversations with people and be like, when someone says, how are you? Not like, oh, I'm great. It's like, no, you know what? My dog died like a month ago. Like, I'm not doing so good. Like, I miss my dog. You know what I mean? Like, shit like that. Like, I don't have to pretend to be anybody more, because it starts with the fact that I'm the most comfortable version of myself that I've been in my entire life. And my question would then be, is it similarly for you? You've reached this point in your life, and is it, how much of that is self-growth? How much of that is like therapy? How much of that is like, you've ticked a lot of boxes, you're married, you've got a great job, you've got an awesome hobby with your podcast, looks like you own your own home. Like, how much of that like process is kind of like informed where you're at today?
Well, I think it's so interesting, because as you're asking me that, I'm like kind of like going back in my brain of, okay, when all of these good things were happening, on paper, that would instill like, I'm super comfortable with who I am, but it totally wasn't. So I do have a great job. I was super lucky to get a teaching job right out of college. Not many people can say that.
Mm-hmm.
I got married. I got married in 2019. I've been with my husband since 2014. We've known each other since 2007. So like, there's a lot that has kind of gone on in obviously all of that time. We bought our house in 2018. Like, all of these, like, checking the boxes. Like, I've done the things that people want in their life, or are currently trying to do in their life, or have done. And I did it at a relatively young age. We bought this house when I was 25. Wow. So it's like, and you know what? But that, like, I'm a firm believer in like, this isn't a race. So like, I have friends who are still living with their parents, or in an apartment or whatever, and they're like, oh, I want what you have. And I'm like, don't compare your beginning to my middle, because it took so much to even be able to do this. Like, my husband and I worked so hard to be able to, do what we're doing now. And it wasn't like this easy thing that we were like, okay, we're 25 now, let's buy a house. Like, we bought our house and got married in the same year. And we did that, with help, of course, in the wedding aspect or whatever, but like, majority, we paid for it ourselves. And we had made that decision when we were 20 and dating. We kind of knew where it was going, and we're like, we're not gonna rent an apartment, and we're gonna really save. I had 3 jobs at one point just to be, because we knew what we wanted, and that was the hard work, where people only see the end result of a 25-year-old buying a house. So yes, there was, there's pride in those things, but starting the podcast, checking the boxes of having a job right out of college and buying a house, getting engaged, getting married, starting a podcast, becoming, I'm using air quotes, but like popular in the podcast platform. Ideally, on paper, you would be pretty confident in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Not the case at all. I started this podcast and I was in such a bad place. So there's a lot of comparison. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, like you said. And I think the shift for me really started in a couple of different ways. I think it's kind of cutthroat, but like I cut out a lot of people in my life who were no longer ever going to be happy for me or supportive. And that's really tough because you have to set that boundary, even though it comes with immense heartbreak. A lot of people talk about, get rid of toxic people in your life and set boundaries and, only be true to yourself. Yeah, all of that, totally. But nobody talks about how hard it's going to be for you to maintain that and not break your own heart because you're letting go of friends, you're letting go of family members. Like, nobody talks about when you cut off a family member who isn't nice to you, that you're never going to go to Thanksgiving again. Like that's the toughest part. So there was a lot of that, a lot of growth, but the growth had to come because I couldn't stay stuck. Like I couldn't just be faking it this whole time. So got myself into therapy. I've been in therapy for about 1.5 years. I'm a huge advocate for it. I think that there's a lot of stigma against it. There's a lot of, I can't be vulnerable because other people have it worse than me. That can't be the conversation because, we all need to be needed and we all want to be wanted, but we never let ourselves take care of our own self. So, a lot of growth happened through that. And I spent a good couple of years really I laugh about it and I say this all the time, but it's the truth. Like I really started kind of dating myself. Like we put so much effort and energy into dating someone else. Like I want to find out everything about them and I want to know what their favorite color is and what their favorite childhood vacation was and what they, what do they like to do on the weekends? And I'm going to take you out to dinner and I'm going to wine and dine you. We never do that to ourselves. Ooh. We never actually sit ourselves down and be like, what do you like? What don't you like? Are you, and I had to, and it wasn't a romantic comedy where it all works out. It was like a horror film. Like I had to sit there and go, do you even like doing this? Or is that even your favorite color? It's stupid, but yeah. I had to really learn to like myself. And I'm on that road right now. Everybody talks about loving yourself. You gotta have self-love. You gotta love your body. But do you even like yourself? Because you can't love yourself until you actually can tolerate being with you.
I love that.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but
it does, for sure.
I think that the podcast definitely made me look in the mirror a lot more clearly. And I knew that if I was going to do this and hopefully do it well, that I had to be authentic. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew it wasn't going to be pretty right away. And I think that, if I can give myself flowers right now, I think that one thing I can appreciate in my own podcast is that it's really no bullshit. I posted a picture a couple weeks ago of me. My husband had taken it of me. I was sleeping with my dog next to me. And on the surface, it's this cute picture of me and my dog. But the reality is that I couldn't get out of bed that day. And he took the picture to show that my dog was next to me, trying to be that support. And I'm not saying I'm the only person who is vulnerable on the internet, but yeah. I can say that I'm probably the only person in my friend group that is vulnerable on the internet. Yeah. And that's with the platform. You have your personal Instagram that is very different for me than my podcast Instagram. And it's almost like a double life, but it's cool. I mean, I'm way more honest on my podcast Instagram than I am in my, regular everyday Instagram that I barely even use.
I think that's,
So,
I mean, there's a lot of important things to kind of unpack from what you just said. And I get caught up in this a lot because I'm very guilty of comparing my chapter 1 to someone's like chapter 30. And like you skip 29 chapters. It's like there's so much that goes into cultivating a podcast that gets thousands of downloads, or an Instagram photography account that has thousands of followers. And, you know, you said you don't look at the analytics. I am trying to get better at not doing it, because I know it's a lot easier said than done in my case, because I take so much pride out of the images that I produce, out of these conversations that I have, that I want more and more people to be exposed to them. And that's incredibly like conceited, and that is slightly arrogant. But the main takeaway would be the relatability in what you said, is that I've, for the first time in my life, figured out a lot of things, and I want to share the journey that it took for me to get here, and hope that someone can relate to that. And whether that is finding a hobby and a passion like I have in both photography and this podcast, whether it is being more vulnerable with my friends and trying to be relatable to them in a way that allows them to be vulnerable with me. You know, we do get caught in this highlight reel of life where we don't have deep conversations with the people in our lives. And it's very difficult to ask difficult questions, and it's very easy to ignore things that are going on that might not be all sunshine and rainbows. And I think that's an important takeaway. I mean, I look at your life, and you look extremely happy and smiley, and you everything looks great. Like, I would never know that you were struggling to get out of bed on a daily, on some daily basis, because we've never had that conversation before. And I think it's such a great thing that we're having it now, and it's such a important indicator for what more people need to be doing. Like, check up on your friends, make sure people are okay.
I always think about, you're 100%. I always think about, I see it on the internet all the time, of like pictures of like Robin Williams and not Travis Barker, excuse me, Chester, can't remember his last name, from Linkin Park. And like, checking in on the people that usually check in on you, like these like light up the room people, and and I like really outgoing, and I appreciate what you said, that like from the outside looking in, seeing my Instagram or my when I was on Facebook or whatever, like I got off Facebook, which was like, I feel like I lost 10 pounds, and it's great. Good. But I you want to talk about a dumpster fire? I appreciate, the facade that, it looks, and listen, I have a wonderful, relatively speaking, wonderful life, great people, 90% of the time, all good. But that 10% is where you live sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's the on a Monday, you're feeling like shit, or, you're having, you went through something, or like, I kind of think that's the best part, only because you don't acknowledge the bad stuff as much as you want to acknowledge the good stuff.
Totally.
So I think, I mean, it's so hard. And I almost want to challenge you, because you said that, you struggle with not looking at the analytics, which I will tell you, I used to, it's so much easier for me now, but to say this, I used to check it every day. Like, every day, like multiple times a day. And then then you have that like, oh my God, why am I even doing this? And who even cares? And, you lose sight of your why. And I remember telling my husband, when this stops being fun, I have to stop doing it.
Yeah.
And because then I've lost sight of my why. So you said that, you struggle with looking at it, and that I feel like I'm interviewing you now, but, you struggle with looking at it, and you have this pride, and you want other people to kind of like be along that ride. I mean, can't you just be proud of yourself no matter what?
No.
Why?
I mean, it's, that's my thing. That's the thing that I'm working on,
Yeah. I mean, so am I. Who am I to
No, I don't. No, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, my thing is like, it's
in a perfect world.
In a perfect
you'd be proud
world,
of yourself
sure.
no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Whether I got 5 likes on a photo or 5,000, it shouldn't matter. But at the end of the day, that is something that matters, right? It's unfortunate. We're just conditioned for it to feel that way. And like, I would like to get to the point where it doesn't, but I'm not. And similarly, like, I look at my life and I'm the most blessed, most lucky. I've got amazing friends, family. I've got the freedom to do whatever I want. I'm truly, 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 truly blessed. But it's also on paper, but it's also like easy for me to like view my life like I'm in a completely different place from everybody I know. And I everyone I know is married.
Is that okay for you?
Totally okay. But it's only recently become that way. I've only recently started, like, I don't give a fuck that I'm 35 and single. Who the fuck cares? Like, maybe I'm going to meet
35 is not 85.
No, I know, but in facts, yes, it's not. Yeah. On paper and on social media, it's just like, oh, what the fuck's wrong with John? He's 35 and single. And like, I don't give a fuck at all. Trust me, I don't care. But I am in a completely different place than everyone else I know in my life. I'm single. I'm not married. I don't have kids, like the whole 9 yards. And like, that's fine. And I'm totally okay with that. 10 years ago, I wasn't okay with it. 10 years, I was like, fuck, why am I still single? Like, why are all my friends married? Why are they all engaged?
You should be single.
Yeah,
like,
not
25.
I listen. I wholeheartedly agree with you on all of these points. My point is ultimately, like, everyone goes through their thing, and trying to reconcile where they're at versus where someone else is goes back to the conversation of, I can't gauge my chapter 30 with your chapter 25.
The book won't make sense if you do.
We all.
And I think that. Yeah. Sorry. Please go.
Yeah, I was gonna say we all experience time differently, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying with, like, it's not a race. Like, you do what you do when you do it. Like, I have an older brother. He is closer to your age. And he struggled a lot with, like, me doing things either before or at the same time as him because I was his little sister.
Sure.
So it's like, but I even would have to challenge him and being like, but who said you have to do things first, or I have to do things in a certain, 100%. We got married 11 months apart. We bought our houses around the same time. I ended up going to school and finishing school before he did. And like that, I think, came with a lot of shame. And, there was like this very affectionate way of like being referred to as like his big little sister. And like, I was kind of like, it doesn't really matter. There's these rules that I think, we establish either ourselves or people establish for us that we're just supposed to abide by. And I kind of just want to call bullshit on that because like I have a really good friend, single, kind of always like, oh, why am I still single? And I want to get married and I want to have kids and I want to start my family and I want to move out of my parents' house and I want. And yeah, I want a lot of things too. And it's like, but we don't get to choose. We don't get to pick. And I think you're doing a great job in number one, like being like, I don't give a fuck. Like, it's cool. I'm happy. And like finding that sweet spot of like, yeah, I want these things, but here's where I'm at right now. And I can't be miserable now because I want to be happy 5 years from now. Like totally. You have to be able to do it now.
Totally.
Because, I think we're taught to just look forward. And like, okay, cool. Yeah, you should have dreams and aspirations and goals, but what about right now? What about Thursday?
You're 100%
what about Friday?
Right. 100%. I mean, 1,000% right. I literally say the same thing because you're always like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like what degree are you going to get? The whole 9 yards. And we don't spend the important time on focusing on the now. I totally get like what your brother feels like. I've got a younger brother who's had his entire life planned out since he was a little kid, and he is now married, ultra successful, killing life, 3 kids, white picket fence, the whole 9 yards. I have no jealousy. I have no, FOMO for that at all. And like, I would understand why someone would. I'm like just extremely proud of him. Like in my best man speech for him, which I fucking killed, by the way. It was such a good speech. Crushed it. I said, I was like, you are my younger brother, but I will always look up to you. And like, there is this fallacy that because age denotes wisdom or denotes success. And it's just not true. And I'm not successful, or I'm not successful because I have less money than my brother, or I don't have a wife or kids. And similarly, for your brother, it's the same thing. It's just we have different paths, and our books are written in different orders, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I was just going to very rudely interrupt you and say, like, what came to mind when you were like, my brother has the white picket fence, the 3 kids, the success, the blah, 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 and you have this, and this. Nowhere does it say that those things have to be identical. They're just different paths. Like, I had people who had this, I really don't want to sound like an asshole, but like this, like, jealousy because of the things that I was doing at a certain time and they weren't. Nowhere did it say that you had to do exactly what I was currently or planned on doing. Like,
I have to disagree with you.
That's the thing that I think
they do say it on Instagram.
Yeah.
They do say it in media and TVs and movies and everywhere else. They say
You're right. And
I don't mean to disagree with you, but it's if we didn't have these unrealistic expectations of what our lives should be, we wouldn't ever have the feeling like we're not good enough.
Yeah, and I think that's a whole other issue, but it's like that's where these resentments build in families and friendships. And, well, you have the thing that I have, or like, I finished college and I got a job. Okay, well, what about the person who didn't want to go to college? Like, that there's that right or wrong when there doesn't need to be. Like, my husband went to trade school for whatever it was, 13 months, or I don't know, it was a long time ago, but like that was his path. And I mean, it was the smarter path.
No shit.
So I'm like,
no shit.
Who's laughing now where he walks out of there with, his trade and a job and he's good. And we're all like, oh, I went to this prestigious school that ultimately not that it didn't do anything for me.
Didn't do anything.
I didn't start. Right. Okay, fine. I didn't start really learning how to be a teacher until I was a teacher.
100%. We can have
trial by fire.
We can have a whole other episode talking about the pitfalls of college and university and how it doesn't pay at all, especially with the economics of it.
Oh my God. And I think it's so funny because I've seen so many things recently where it's like, no job has ever asked for proof of going to college. Like, hey, can I see your degree? Like, they're just like, oh, you went to this school, right? And it's like, I could have faked it this whole time.
I applied for an investment banking job straight out of college. I did have to provide my transcripts. So some do. Ultimately, so I did and too. You would think that a teacher would as well, but you probably didn't. You're probably correct.
I had to give them maybe it was my transcripts, but also like my praxis score, which was like the test you take to be a teacher.
Oh,
and it's very, I remember like studying for a year, crying all the time, and you take the test, right? And it gives you the score right away. So like you're sitting there like waiting and you put so much emphasis on like, this has to be what I have to pass. I have to do this thing. And it's like, I love my job. I don't want to sound like an asshole, but like, did I even want to be a teacher? Do you know what I mean? Where it's like you put this out there.
You probably had an inkling that is something that you wanted to do, and through 5, 6, 7, 8 years of doing it, now it's reaffirmed the fact that like even though you didn't know you wanted to do it in your 20s, you made the right decision long term.
I love it. Yeah. I do. I love it for kind of the same reason that I love my podcast. Like teaching older kids, comes with like
headaches,
things that I hate. Yeah. Oh yeah. But it's the rapport, it's the conversations, it's giving them a perspective that is different than their parents. Like a lot of these kids really absorb like what their parents say and what their parents think, and I can be that like outside perspective that's like, let's think about it this way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the best part of my job, and but no, I wanted to be an actor.
I love that.
I pursued it for more like in my childhood. Like I did like modeling stuff. Oh, I sound so douchey. I did modeling stuff. I did commercials and I had, I was represented by a company and it was awesome. And then I kind of was like, I need to quit because this isn't going to be something that I can do as a career.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it died. And I always think about like, what would have happened if I said, no, I'm going to keep doing this. But then I think about like, is it really all is it worth it? Because I see these celebrities or, people who are in that industry and they're miserable and they're, I'm very heavily, invested in the Britney Spears stuff right now. So it's like,
It's crazy.
I think I'm all right. I think I'm all right being your average Joe, so to speak.
I'm 35. I think when you start realizing that at the end of the day, people are just people, whether they are the police officer, the judge, the doctor, the actor, the musician, doesn't matter what the thing is that you do. We're just people. Some people have it figured out. Some people really don't. And others are just trying to figure it out. And I think the sooner you realize that everyone is having the same shared experience in their own way, shape, or form, the easier it is to relate to people and understand, both their positives and negatives as people. So yeah, for sure. I like to spend the last little bit of every of my podcast episodes asking a couple rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Some are like yes or no. Some you can dive into as deeply as you want. But my first question
is going to be where I practice self-control and not going off on tangents.
No, tangent away.
No.
Please.
We're gonna keep it simple.
Okay.
All right. I'm ready.
Are you happy?
Yes.
Good. What's your biggest fear?
Getting old. I'm so scared of being elderly. Now, if I can, just indulge me for a second. My first job was at a senior citizen, assisted living. And I started there when I was 16 and I worked there for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So oh my gosh, the things that I saw and you see, and it sounds really I don't want to, you just see deterioration and seeing somebody who lived, relatively speaking, independently when they arrive and the way that, I saw a lot in those 10 years. And I just have this fear of not being able to take care of myself or hold a fork or, it's literally so scary. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of getting old. I had my grandmother passed away both my grandparents on my dad's side passed away really young. My grandfather was 58.
Oh, wow.
Which at the time you're like, oh, old, because I was 7. And then now being my dad's 57. And then my grandmother passed away when she was 68. Again, young to me, from Alzheimer's. And that's, if we can partner that, getting old, but also not remembering. Yeah. Those are big fears. And then of course, spiders that fly, right? That's pretty scary too.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. I'm with you on a lot of that. The Alzheimer thing definitely freaks me out. Dying is a fear of mine, but I think it's more so dying without feeling like I've accomplished the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I relate to a lot of that for sure. What are you most proud of?
Oh, that's really tough. Personally, not with, okay.
Could be anything.
I'm proud of, no, I just mean I would love to say I'm proud of other people, but I shouldn't do that. I should talk about myself.
Yeah.
That's just who I am, to be my friends. I'm really proud of the steps that I've taken in the last couple of years to figure out who I actually am. And I think that in turn has made me proud of myself in a way that I've never been. If you were to ask me 2 years ago, are you proud of yourself? I would have been like, for what? No. Whereas now I think, there's a shame in, being your own fan. I'm proud of starting a podcast for sure. It's really vulnerable. to put yourself out there. So yeah, I think I'm proud of like dating myself and learning to like myself and being on that road. It's not easy, but there's pride in there can be pride even though it's also difficult.
I like that. What inspires you and what gives you confidence?
Ooh, these are really hard questions. What inspires me? My friends definitely inspire me. I have the greatest group of people. I've had the same best friends since I was 11.
Oh, nice.
I'm very, very loyal to the people in my life. Unless I cut you out, sorry. That wasn't my fault. My one friend is a lawyer. My other friend is like an accountant, but is like super successful. My other friend is like super high up in her field, and like professionally they're killing it, but also personally I surround myself with the most supportive, positive, just good people. And they inspire me to give myself flowers too. I think that they're really good at calling me on my bullshit. My one best friend, I love her, but she drives me crazy because every time I say something negative about myself, whether it's like body image stuff or like the self-deprecating humor that I have, she makes me say 3 nice things about myself, which is the most infuriating. No, it's the most infuriating thing. Because when you're like, oh, I look gross today, whatever, she'll be like, saying 3 nice things. It's the last thing you want to do. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this right now. She's like, you better. So, that my friends inspire me. I mean, I really look up to people who are kind of similar in the way that I am, of like being in the trenches and not having this like holier than thou perspective on their own life. So generally speaking, I really try to curate like my Instagram feed or things like that with people who only make me feel good about myself. So I started unfollowing a lot of profiles that made me sad when I looked at them, like Victoria's Secret or, celebrities that, just, ugh. But yeah, that inspires me. And then what was the second part of the question?
What gives you confidence?
My humor. I would like to say, if I can, that most days I find myself funny. But
so do I.
That's a big confidence point with me, because I do have a good enough ability to make people laugh. And I don't know, I think maybe this is like a fault, but I love the feeling of someone laughing at something I've said.
Totally.
Isn't that like such a good feeling?
There's nothing better.
How can you not be confident in that?
Yeah.
Like you say something and someone loses their shit and you're like,
yeah, totally.
Oh, amazing.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, so that makes me confident for sure. And I think that, just not taking yourself too seriously.
Amen. What's your favorite book?
Ooh. Orbiting Jupiter by Gary D. Schmidt. If you have not read it, it's beautiful and simple. And I read it to my students every year. And I cry every year. How embarrassing. Like I lose my mind in front of 14-year-olds and they're like, and it's like the beginning of the year too. And they're like, my teacher is fucking weird. So that's probably my favorite book. And then you're supposed to say like The Great Gatsby too, which is again, another favorite,
I like
but
it, yeah.
I have a really big problem. Oh God, here we go. I have a really big problem with like people who are readers or English teachers and have to be like, oh, you need to only like, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison or, The Great Gatsby or Hemingway. Or,
they're bougie.
You can like, you can like, I don't know.
Harry Potter.
The Gossip Girl series. I've never read it, but you know what I mean? Like you can still be a reader and not be so like obnoxious about it.
But that's like people with anything. Like, you know, my next question being, what's your favorite movie? And it's like, if you don't say something that's like by Alfred Hitchcock or, you know, something, whatever, you know, people get indignant about like the thing that's like their thing. It's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to like old school just as much as I'm allowed to like a critically acclaimed movie. It doesn't matter.
100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
I follow this this subreddit. I don't know if you're on Reddit.
I'm not.
That's dumpster fire as well. I follow this subreddit on books, and because I'm a huge reader, like that's something that if I don't, you can't really see, but there's like a huge bookcase behind me that's overflowing. I no longer have room. But I love books. I love reading, and this subreddit is just bullshit because people are like, you know, you have to only like these, you know, very famous. But listen, I've read the classics. They suck.
Not
a lot
all
of them suck. A lot of them suck. I read, I started to read, like, I don't want to say the names because, like, different strokes for different folks, but I'm like, I'm a teacher and this book sucks.
Yeah.
The Handmaid's Tale. Love the show. I think it is one of the best TV shows. The books suck.
Really?
Yeah, and I very rarely say that.
Wow.
They're okay. They're not like, oh my god, this book is so good, I can't put it down. It's like, yeah, I had to force myself to read both of them. Wow. There's 2 of them.
I'm shocked. I didn't expect that. I have them on my Amazon cart, but I haven't bought them just because I like the show so much that I thought, what if I don't like it?
The show is so good.
So good.
Are you caught up?
Yeah, I finished it, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So fucking good.
It's so good. Although, I do laugh a lot at how they do, like, the close-ups of just, like, you know, Elizabeth Moss's character, like, for, like, 30 seconds, and you're like, okay, we get it. Stop.
Well, she directed a lot of episodes this year, so
I did see that, and I'm like, was she just like, I need a minute, you know, like
this season was super
but I do,
good.
I love it.
Yes, so good.
Everybody in that show is so good that you forget. I forget their acting.
Yeah.
Like Serena's character, I'm like, wow, if I found her in a corner, like, I just want to talk, you know, but I'm going to beat the shit out of her. Yeah. But, yeah, I will say that the show is better than the books.
Nice. Well, I won't read it then.
No, you should. You still should. I mean, they're, fuck. See? Can I answer my own question of favorite movie?
Yeah. Well, that was the next question.
I mean, you didn't ask me, but I knew
that was the next question. Yeah.
It's a split.
I don't know
it's
that.
An even split because I cannot decide between. No, not Split. That movie was like, shit. Wow. But no, although James McAvoy is really good. It's a split between The Shawshank Redemption and Walk the Line.
I mean, Shawshank.
Very different movie.
Shawshank, all-time classic. Walk the Line.
Watch yourself here.
Listen, I love Johnny Cash.
Me too.
Joaquin Phoenix did a very good job. I don't know. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so the only reason I'm gonna like defend myself here.
You don't have to. It's not like I'm not like attacking.
I'm on trial here. I'm like 100 years old, so like
you look great. You look really good for your age.
I think it's the night cream. Yeah. No, I think I grew up really quick when I was young because like of like circumstances. But I've always enjoyed like Johnny Cash's music and that, you know, that type of vibe. Like I grew up, you know, my friends grew up like watching, you know, kids shows and my parents, maybe it was an immigrant thing, but like I was 6 years old watching ER, NYPD Blue, the Drew Carey Show, like The Sopranos. I'm like 6 years old and I'm like, put it on HBO, let's go. And same thing with music. My dad was a DJ part-time. And so I grew up listening to Bryan Adams, Bon Jovi, the Cranberries. Like I did not listen to Kesha. You know what I mean? Like
Wake up in the morning.
Right. No. I mean I did, of course, but like I remember like getting my first iPod and putting Meatloaf and NYPD Blue, excuse me. You know, Bon Jovi and Bryan Adams and like
different stuff.
Who's 12 listening to that? And so Johnny Cash, I don't know what it was. I loved everything about him. And when the movie came out, it like really, you know, enforced that. But I will say that I didn't love a lot of the focuses of that movie, because I think that there was more to talk about than just like the relationship aspect of it. But I do love Johnny Cash a lot. So that's where it comes from. But
Listen,
I have the soundtrack.
I'm with you. I love Johnny Cash. You could put it on in almost any scenario in your life. Happy, sad, working out, whatever. It's great. It applies to like fucking everything.
Yeah.
The movie was okay.
Oof.
Sorry.
Ooh, tough critic.
All right.
Is it a Reese Witherspoon thing?
Nah,
do you not like her?
I love Reese Witherspoon.
Me too.
Love her.
I do too.
Love. No,
she's probably my favorite actress.
I'll rewatch it. You know, I haven't seen it probably in like 12
it's okay.
plus
I mean,
years.
Listen,
yeah. I watch everything. So just because I have an ill connotation for something now doesn't mean I didn't like it at the time. But I remember I saw it 2 or 3 times when it first came out, and I was like, you know. Because like Ray came out a year or 2 later, and Ray was fucking amazing. Jamie Foxx killed it.
Ray.
Oh, see, yeah. I mean,
I also don't really like Jamie Foxx.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, you know, he's played a lot of weird characters, but like he was incredible as Ray. Incredible. So
I'm sure
it's all right. You know, listen, I'll watch it again. I will report back on my updated philosophy on Walk the Line. Shawshank, obviously, classic, top 10 for sure.
Shawshank, you just like, oh my God, it's just every time it's so good.
100%.
A couple of years ago, my husband had never seen it, so I was like, we have to watch this. And it ended, and I have like, you know, when it's the movie you like, you're like, what do you think? He was like, it was good. I'm like, that's it? What the fuck?
What
you know what I mean?
Good?
So I'm like, right, it was great. But with your Jamie Foxx is kind of how I feel about like Denzel Washington. Like, he's done so much, but my favorite thing by Denzel Washington is John Q.
Oh my God, what a good movie. Yeah.
Right? Like, you forget about that was such a good movie.
Yeah. But he's amazing in everything. Literally everything.
So good. He's so good.
My last question. It's a doozy. Do you believe in an afterlife?
That's a crazy question.
I like to save it for last.
You should start with that. What's your favorite movie? An easy question to friggin' answer. Do I believe in an afterlife? I struggle with that because I'm very rooted in like everything needs to have an answer. Like a question needs to have an answer. And I really struggle with that with like my faith because you're just supposed to believe something. I was a CCD kid. So like you know, you went once a week and you hated every minute of it. And you know, you made your communion, your confirmation, and then you went on Christmas Eve and Easter and that was it. Like I never was somebody who like felt that they had to go to church to believe in something.
Totally the same.
And then, you know, life kind of gives you some shitty circumstances where like your best friend dies for no reason and, you know, your dad gets sick and, you know, all these things. I mean, you learn from it and you grow and it's life, but like, I don't know. I think I would like to, I want to believe that there's I really do because
otherwise what's the point?
Sometimes yeah and that's what I struggle with too is like sometimes, you know, you want the success and you want the fortune and all of the big house and, you know, the in-ground pool, whatever, and then you think about it and you're like, well, what's the fucking point? We're all gonna die. And I hate those are the questions that like keep me up.
So I will say that my relationship with religion has waned as I've gotten later in life because I have fundamental issues at hand with like my church and whatnot saying who can marry who and like all this shit that fundamentally is completely irrelevant to religion. Religion should be inclusive.
I was rooting for the Pope until he came out and was like,
So, like, religion should be inclusive instead of exclusive. My thought
Agreed.
process on an afterlife is it just seems highly unlikely to me that human beings just popped out of a primordial pool of fucking shit a billion years ago, and like we've somehow come from monkeys to fucking human beings to like I've got a supercomputer in my pocket. So to me, it just doesn't seem plausible that this was an accident. There has to be something out there bigger than ourselves. And listen, maybe it's just us, a generation of human beings that are no longer around. Maybe it is a godlike creature. Who the fuck knows? Man, woman, black, white, orange, yellow, orangutan. I don't care what the hell it is.
Yeah, I'd like to have wings.
Yeah, right, exactly. There must be more. It is just so improbable that this is it. It's impossible. I just refuse to believe it. And I've also
that helps.
Yeah,
that helps. Because there's logic attached to it.
Yeah.
So,
but it's my logic, so it's not completely logical.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm just like you're gonna say that I said you need to give people flowers. I'm gonna take that logic and take it as fact because I mean, I've lost so many important people in my life, and there's been times where like you know that they're still around and they've got your back and that has to mean something. Like, I can't tell you, my best friend's name was Jackie. Oh my gosh, I miss her all the time. And there's been so many times where I've been like, I talk to her in my head like I'm talking to you, and I'll turn on the TV or the radio or something, and the first word that comes out of the person's mouth is Jackie. And I'm like, that's not an accident. Yeah. Like, that can't be.
100%.
So those are the times where I'm like, okay, you got me. Like, I know. And I think that's when it comes to an afterlife, I think it goes hand in hand with like being able to have faith.
Mm-hmm.
And faith is, like you said, it's tough because it's no longer like, here's something that you can believe. It's become like, here's something you need to believe, but only you can believe it. You're not allowed to even come into the door. And you can only come in if you give me a donation every 6 months. Like, I didn't want to get married in a church because I don't really go to church. And if I wanted to get married in a church, because I'm not a part of that church or whatever the reason was, they wanted a donation. Okay, what's the donation? Like, $2,000? Like, that's what's good. What?
Yeah.
So those things, that part of it, and listen, I know you got to keep the lights on. I understand that.
But they rub fundamentally up against the teachings of the thing that they're supposed to be doing.
Right. It's become so, it's just become so skewed. And I am a firm believer in, like, I don't need to go to church to believe in what I believe in.
Couldn't agree more.
And that's where a lot of people get really put into this box of like, you're not a Christian or a Catholic or practicing any religion if you're not following by their rules. Well, God didn't make the rules.
Yeah, we did.
We did. Like, I don't believe me.
Yeah, no. Some guy told some other guy to etch it on some fucking stones 2,000 years ago. It's like, come on, guys, come on, call a spade a spade.
I really struggle with, and not to get into this like theological, whatever, but I really struggle with people who, take the Bible and they're like, this is what it says. And I'm like, the Bible says you shouldn't get a haircut.
Yeah.
Like,
fundamentally, and like, I'm all for people having their own thing. Like, you can and say whoever you want, but like,
do your thing.
Yeah, I've got an issue with it.
Yeah.
A big one. Because those are the same people that will somehow make excuses for the fact that their priest, like, fucking jerked off a 13-year-old boy.
Dude, it's just kind of, and listen, I am not, like, shitting on people who are religious.
Not
like,
at
you all need something to believe in.
To each their own.
But I think that there's a difference between believing in something because it's at your core what you believe, but also using, on the other side of it, using that belief as an excuse to spew hate.
Truth.
That, like, you can't put lipstick on that pig and say, like, I'm a God-fearing person, and that's why I don't allow, you can't come into my house if you're this color, or if you love this person, or if you believe differently than I do. That's not being a God-fearing person. That's just being an asshole.
Or a bigot. Yeah. Truth.
Yeah. And I'm, I have a very like open door policy. Like anything goes when it comes to like, you want to come to my house, you come as you are. Actually, that's my
doormat.
It's literally come as you are. Where I took it as like this like philosophical, beautiful thing, and my husband's like, oh, like the song?
I was just gonna say, isn't that a Nirvana song?
It is a Nirvana song.
Yeah.
So we had like, he's whatever, it's double meaning. But I mean, I think it still holds true. Like, who am I to judge you? I'm like, who am I?
I'm as faulted and as broken and as fucked up as everyone else.
Right. And I think that's a really nice full circle moment of like, we're all kidding ourselves if I can look at someone else and say, I'm better than you because you want to wear a skirt and like you do whatever. Actually, that's a really good book. If you think, coming back to it, The 57 Bus, nonfiction, taken from, it's a book that is all, it's about somebody who does, I don't want to give things away, but does something to somebody just because they're a man wearing a skirt. And it's all about, or everything from the book is taken from police records, eyewitness interviews, character witnesses, but it's written as a story. So it's not like dull, but it's really all about, it's about somebody who, true story, this happened in California, in Oakland. And it was all about somebody who set someone else on fire for wearing a skirt.
Well, you preempted my final question, which is what was one recommendation for everyone, book, podcast, movie, something, etc. So you got it.
No, that's not fair. That's not even a good one. I mean, it is. It's a great book. But damn. All right.
You can give me another. Just one recommendation of something you've consumed lately. Could be a TV show, a movie, podcast, book, whatever. Just something that you've recently digested that you would like everyone to check out.
It's not super recent, but I think it's important nonetheless. On Netflix, there's a documentary series. It's called When They See Us. Have you I haven't heard of this?
No.
Oh, okay. Everybody, I think it's such an important thing to consume because it just shows how easy it is to be manipulated by people, and how much easier it is as a person of color. So it's the true story of the Central Park Five.
Oh, okay,
five kids.
I didn't watch it.
Children.
13, yeah. Who
were charged with raping a girl when they did not do it, falsely accused, falsely imprisoned for like 25 years, and the process of that, and then partnering that, When They See Us, the show. It's 5 episodes, very, very hard to get through, but so important that you stick with it, and then. Right after that, like when the show is over, they'll have like a recommendation right at the end at Netflix. There's an interview. Oprah does an interview with the actors, but then also with the real people who lived through this. So important because it's really easy to throw stones when you're, especially right now in the climate that we have. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate for reading and for consuming things that actually like are worth your time, because you put yourself in that person or those people's shoes for the 300 pages or for the couple of hours of the show, and you walk away with a different perspective. And I think that's what makes you a more well-rounded or empathetic person, because you've been engulfed in that for that amount of time. And that's why I like reading more than I like watching TV, because you become that character and you can't walk away from that book the same as the way you entered it.
I like that.
But with the show, so good.
I'll check it out for sure.
So hard to get through. The 5th episode, I watched all 4 episodes in one day, and I had to go to sleep, so I didn't watch the 5th episode. I got up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and like I couldn't not finish it. And I would be lying if I said I didn't ugly cry the entire time.
I can imagine. It's
good.
My recommendation is a book I just completed called Film for Her. It's like a collection of poetry and art, stories and such, by this, like, she's a poet, turned Instagram person, whatever. And I'm going to butcher her last name. Her name's like Orion Carlito or some Carnito, something I can't pronounce, but I'll tag in the show notes. She has written 2 books. The first one was, I think, just strictly poetry. I haven't bought it yet. Film for her, I picked up because I follow her on Instagram, but I shoot primarily film photography. Maybe not so much lately, but for the most part, a lot of my photography work is done via film. And I just really loved how she kind of incorporated these images that she took of her life and her surroundings and incorporated them with like these, poems or short stories that she's writing along with the images. And I don't know, it was just really, really great. I'll link it in the notes below. She's pretty sweet. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I had such a good time. This was such a tremendously awesome chat. Really look forward to obviously us doing it again. And like I said earlier, we are family. It's nice to not meet you yet, but we've been talking for 8 years. We'll grab a beer sometime soon. But thank you so much 100%. For coming on.
Thank you for having me. I had the best time.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Take care.